Andy Farrell will be far happier this weekend than last after his Lions side got up and running in Australia with an emphatic 54 points to 7 win over the Western Force in Perth. I'm Will Slattery, and I'm delighted to be joined for our post-match reaction by our man in Australia, Ruaidhri O'Connor. But first, our rugby coverage on the Indo Sport podcast is brought to you by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the Energia AIL, and as official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, and the Irish men's and women's team. The Energia Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion, welcoming everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and find out about their inclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Rud, as I said, emphatic victory for the Lions, far sharper than last Friday night against Argentina, albeit a much different kind of opposition. What's the big takeaways for you? I saw the headline of your match report kind of teeing up Joe McCarthy after his big, powerful performance. He's one of a few players who really put their hand up.
Yeah, I think it was a really decent exercise for the Lions. I thought the Western Force were a very game opponent, and for 40 minutes really put it up to them. They held onto the ball for a lot of that first half, exposed a few chinks in the Lions' armour that I'm sure Joe Schmidt had his pen and pencil out and was kind of his pen and paper out and making notes about kind of the Lions' restart work, their discipline. And I don't know if it got picked up on the Sky broadcast back home, but you could see over here Andy Farrell in the huddle at halftime, looking pretty pissed off and pretty animated with his players, urging a lot more from them as they faced into that second half without Henry Pollock, who'd been sin-binned for kind of a cumulative an accumulation of yellow cards across that first half. But I think what we saw in the second half was far more of what he wants to see from this Lions group. And it was built on that first half at the same time, because they did concede a try after 5 minutes, having scored a brilliant try to open it up after 97 seconds or whatever it was. They did keep the Force at bay, despite the fact that the Force had so much possession. Josh van der Fleer was really industrious. But they kind of got on top of them then second half and kind of ran in a couple of really, really lovely tries, opened up. And it's funny, we had the press box here is behind glass. We had the Australian broadcast being piped in to us. And it was interesting listening to kind of Justin Harrison, Michael Hooper talking about this Lions group and how they were kind of almost surprised by how ambitious they were with ball in hand, but it looked kind of like what Ireland do, and I thought Finn Russell excelled as well. So there was a lot of good performance, a few not so good, a few elements of the game that they'd be really wanting to sharpen up on, but also far more promise, far more of that cohesion and connectivity that Farrell wants to see. Some lovely attacking touches, some excellent defensive work, and I think a pretty good start to their life as Lions in Australia.
Yeah, a very soft landing for the guys who hadn't played yet compared to what the people had to face into last Friday. As we had teed up, after that game, that it was going to be a very different proposition. As you pointed out, some really good work early on. I thought opening try, Finn Russell's cross kick, like Lowe and Sheehan linking on the wing. What a great moment for Dan Sheehan, not only getting the captaincy, but that early try. Gary Ringler was going around melting people in the first half. There would probably been a huge queue for the team doctor to get some ribs taped up, I'd say, after that. What did you make of the Irish contingent? Because that was kind of one of the big pre-match talking points, that the Irish had a bit of an advantage, not only knowing the system, getting that maybe easier opening assignment. How did the Irish contingent play today?
I think most of them will leave pretty happy. Tadhg Beirne gave away a few soft penalties, and I think will be disappointed enough, but he was one of the two players who backed up, and he was one of the first players taken off as a result. So I think maybe fatigue had set in. I'm not sure Tadhg Beirne is a six at this stage of his career. He was, Andy Farrell uses the phrase desperate a lot. He doesn't want his players to be desperate. I thought at times during that first half, they were desperate in their discipline. They were trying to force turnovers when they got to realize they're an international team playing against a provincial team. If they just make their tackles, they're not going to get broken as easily as they would if they're playing in a test against Australia. And if they just show some patience and don't rush that, force that breakdown penalty, it'll come. So I think Beirne will be a little bit disappointed, but I'm not going as far as saying he's played his way out in any way. But I think others, McCarthy in particular, wow, he was so physical. Go for it, Will.
Yeah, I was going to say that the McCarthy Beirne thing is funny, though, because I feel like now they're competing in direct competition. It was a huge day for Tadhg Beirne. The narrative around needing that number 6, that kind of more traditional style number 6. I agree with you, Rud. I think he's been fairly entrenched at second row now. It's probably going back to 2021 when he was last really operating at 6, the highest level at international level. McCarthy was so powerful today. that it's very hard to see him not being included in a meaningful way. And now all of a sudden he's scrapping with Beirne. Obviously, Maro Itoje, that subplot of him not being included at all. Now all of a sudden maybe he's kind of playing for his place a small. But I think McCarthy's performance today, saw him with man of the match with the medal around his neck a minute ago, really kind of upsets maybe the pecking order and the early kind of running and riding there.
I think there's a theory developing here that the Wednesday team is going to be the main team in this on this year's tour, and that the time that Andy Farrell really puts his tour is full side together is that Brumbies game, which actually happens at the same time as State of Origin. So no one in Australia will be watching apart from the people in the stadium and Joe Schmidt, but that we might see the kind of culmination of what Andy Farrell's putting together in that Wednesday game, because it gives him a 10-day kind of lead in. Because like obviously Itoje is going to be playing in the first test. He's not going to drop as captain, and just even looking at the rhythm of the games and the fact that they play an Anzac selection the Saturday before the first test, that's not going to be a real game in the sense that the Brumbies game is going to be a real game. So we're kind of, there's a bit of groupthink going on, but I think it makes more sense that we're going to.
That's what you get from being on the ground, Rod. That's an unbelievable Wednesday, Saturday flip around narrative. That's why you're there, Rod, for those little nuggets.
Yeah. But I'm not saying that these lads on the Saturday are dirt trackers at all, because I think he is also trying to get lads, a game. And Dan Sheehan is a guaranteed test starter. And I think you're right. Like, I wouldn't be writing Tadhg Beirne's chances off at all, because he's done it so often for Andy Farrell. He had a good game against Argentina. He went 80 minutes in that game. He was cramping up at the end of it. And I did think it was a little bit of a tired display from Beirne in that first half. I think Scott Cummings, the Scotland lock, probably played his way out of any contention, because he, like, particularly under the restart, he had an absolute nightmare. I counted that the Lions lost 6 of their 8 restarts, of the Forces restarts. And while Nick White was putting up some lovely kind of flat and difficult to take kicks, like that's not sustainable at all. So he had a difficult night at the office. McCarthy, Sean, I thought Josh van der Fleer. I know Pollock will get a lot of the headlines because of the again, like this contrast between Henry Pollock, who can do wonderful things on the rugby pitch, and he does things that no one else in this squad is able to do in terms of some of his running thread, and that chip and chase that led to McCarthy's try. But what Van der Fleer delivered in terms of consistency across the 80 minutes was excellent. It was really, really good. Now, again, we're talking about Josh Van der Fleer, World Player of the Year, 3 years ago, up against a club team, albeit his opposite number is in Wallabies contention, in Nick Champion, the Crespini, who is being considered, I think, a potential fellow who could make an impact on the Test series. He's just come back from France. He's uncapped, but he's a good player and he's quite strong. But I thought Van der Fleer had a really good. I thought Ringrose, you're right to mention him, was excellent. Didn't think Tuipulotu had a brilliant game. I think he's quiet. I think he's struggling to get his form back after coming back from that injury. Both wingers played really well, and Sheehan was quiet. The try was excellent. Didn't do an awful lot, but they left him out there for an awful long time. Kelleher was good off the bench. Porter, I didn't see much of, but I mean, when you're writing match reports in the last 20 minutes and the game was kind of done by then.
It was over, yeah.
Furlong struggled in the scrum. The scrum wasn't great and Furlong was under pressure there, so he won't be happy with his night. And he was up against a loose head who normally plays tight head in Robertson, so they'll be a bit upset about that, I'd say. It was a sandy pitch. It wasn't great. I don't think they were worried about that, yesterday being here for the captain's run. But that's not really an excuse for an experienced tight head like Ty. He'll be disappointed with how that went. And it didn't go great after he came on the last day either. So he needs to find a bit of form after his injury. But again, he's a player with a lot of credit in the bank. And then beyond the Irish lads, like Pollock had such an interest tonight. I don't know what you made of it watching on TV. Like he makes some brilliant breaks. He gets in a couple of scraps. He misses a big tackle, gets himself sin bin, which in fairness was a team offence, but he didn't need to give away that penalty. He's kind of box office in terms of he's involved in loads. I don't think he's as consistent as he could be across the game because he's 20 years old. Like, we're looking at a potential world star, probably not even potential. The guy is going to be a really real star in the game. But I still don't know if you put him out in a test match against Australia.
For me,
against an experienced team.
Test impact player, it seems to be what that all the things you described there for me indicate a 25-minute, throw him in, agent of chaos in the test match. I agree with you. I don't know if I'd have him in the starting team at this point of his career, but again, there's still a good few matches to be played. It'll be interesting to see how he develops. Like those 2 big bursts he makes and the chip and chase and gathering that ball. There is almost, I can't think of another back row in the world, in international level, who has that kind of footballing ability. Like, he was able to kick it and gather.
Ardie Savea.
Ardie Savea, yeah, he's done it before. He did it at the World Cup, I think, didn't he, in that opening game against?
Joe Schmidt designed strike plays so that Ardie Savea could chip the ball with his left foot. at times. But like you're talking about probably the best player of the last 5-6 years in Ardie Savea, and that's who you're kind of comparing this guy with. And I think I maybe Jerry Thorney in the Irish Times kind of said that like this guy's going to be terrorizing Irish teams for the next 10 years. And I think he's right about that. I think this guy is going to be around for a long time, and this experience is going to stand to him. But where he kind of fits in terms of the, like, it's hard to ignore what he's able to do. That stuff that you're talking about there. But there's also, you know, he's still not as physical as he could be around the breakdown, around the tackle area. He's not as consistent in the tackle area. And I think he's going to leave this tour a much better player, and he will have a role to play in the test, but I don't think it's as a test starter. But like, that's still, it's only his second game. Like, he's been involved in both games. He's got loads of room to grow. And, you know, they left him out there for, you know, once he came back on, he was left out there as well. So he's got an unbelievable experience here. He's going to be a bit of a cult hero, I'd say, with the fans. And like, this is what Lions tours, like, there's momentum behind him as well. So it's really fascinating to see how Farrell treats that. He's talking a big, you know, Farrell likes him. He really rates him, and he's kind of, you know, he's not dampening down the hype, but he's trying to kind of build up his kind of the talk around his attributes rather than just the kind of showy stuff. But I think he likes his training attitude. He likes his willingness to work and to learn. So he's definitely got to be a big character on this tour.
It is the showy attributes, though, that will get him involved, I think, because he's not as good at the other parts of the game as the other option. So I think you have to almost lean into the eye-catching moments that the other guys can't do, rather than maybe try to make him be something he's not. He's, as you say, he's only 20. It's mad that he's so young. And on that point, like, the one player I was kind of a little disappointed, Jack Conan off the bench, like, you know, he's usually so good in that role. No, I know the game was kind of done, like, but there was a lot of players out there making bursts, making things happen towards the end. Maybe the ball just didn't go his way. I need to rewatch it back. I'm not saying he was poor. Maybe, you know, the ball can't break your way every time, but after being kind of named on the bench unexpectedly, like, I was thought he would definitely start the opener. He was being nailed on, and
Wednesday team,
what?
Wednesday team.
Yeah, okay, maybe this feeds into your narrative. I'll be fascinated to see Monday morning now, because I don't think he did a whole pile when he came on. Whereas Henry Pollock, who started late, obviously had a lot of headlines.
Yeah, and that's a bit of a rocket up Jack Conan, because he probably came over here thinking he was going to be the starting eight. Obviously, Ben Earl is also in the mix for that role. There was a kind of a right to left pass from Tuipulotu, which, you know, Conan was on the wing. He had kind of room to kind of charge onto it, and the pass just died in the air and he spilled it. But at that stage, it was a difficult game for those guys that come on for the last half an hour to come in and impact, because it was kind of gone very loose. And
Kelleher was good.
Kelleher was good. No, absolutely. Yeah. He was. No, I'm not giving him a pass necessarily, but I'm just saying, you know, to come in and really dominate. It was the lads who were there, or even like Lowe and Hansen just kept playing their way into it. He kept, like, Lowe was really good. I think you're looking at the test wingers there. I know Freeman has a big role to play in this, but Hansen just gives you so much extra. The way they linked up for that try up the right Lowe touched the ball 3 times in that try, I think, for Thomas Williams up the right. Unfortunately, that didn't look great when Williams pulls up at a hammer. Yeah, it's such a short tour. You wonder whether he can get back. I'd say Jack Van Poortvliet could be keeping his phone on wherever in the world he is, because I think England are in Argentina now, or someone like Craig Casey could get the call. But the fact that Van Poortvliet's done a bit of training with them gives him the advantage of knowing the system. I guess Casey does as well. Ben White, another option, but we'll find out at the press conference in the next few minutes what the word is there. But that doesn't look good.
Yeah, the way he limped off and kind of looking at his expression, I would say probably a couple of weeks, which in this tour is probably a killer. And as you said, Jack Van Poortvliet, given he was in for training, I think he's the next man up. James Lowe, you're sorry.
Yeah, and even if there's any doubt, like, because it's a specialised position, they need to get another scrum. Yeah. Even if they don't send Williams home, they're calling up another scrum half, I'd say. Yeah,
I think that the number 11 jersey is shut case now. Like, Van der Merwe's opener, Lowe was his ever-present self, so involved, beautifully linked, as I said, with Sheen for the first try, popped up a number of other occasions, really, really good. Let's talk about Elliot Daly, the 32-year-old bolter. Thought he was really good today, really solid. Obviously, got the 2 tries, got in the end of things, but insofar as we mentioned in prior shows, Keenan injured, maybe playing in the Wednesday team, this new Wednesday team. You know, obviously Kinghorn playing tonight for Toulouse. Like, Daly all of a sudden looks really ultra reliable. And even if he starts the first test, I could maybe see one of the other guys coming in for second or third test, because they probably are better players. But Daly, really, really reliable. I thought he did a very good game.
Yeah, I've always been a big Elliot Daly fan, and it's just broken lovely for him. He's the fit guy, and he's the fittest guy in terms of he's available. Like, that ability, the best ability is availability. He's here, he's fit, he's in form. And I thought he nailed his role tonight. He looked really comfortable in everything he did. I think when you've got Matt Hansen on one wing and James Lowe on the other, you don't need to do a lot of counter-attack stuff. I think you just need to feed the beasts and let them off and do your own job really well, which he did. And he also, like, you can't ignore the fact that he can kick a ball over from inside his own half. You know, like, that's a massive asset to have in a test series. So he's in pole position now. Keenan is coming back off that injury. It's been a while since he played. Like, there's a pressure on him to deliver if he does play on Wednesday. And Kinghorn's really, like, he's obviously incredibly talented, so exciting as a player, and I think they'll really want to get him on board because he is so good, and he could come into that wing conversation as well because he's very good in that position as well. But he's doing it from so far behind because of how, like, he's not going to play on Wednesday. He might play next Saturday, but like that's the first of 3 games. You know, that's all he's got, and obviously he can't play in all 3 of them necessarily before the first test. So he like, some of these players will play a role later into the test series, but if you're looking at that first test team, well, I think Daly's put one hand on that jersey, and it's up to Keenan to come along and rip it off him.
The last 4 series, I can remember significant changes across the 3 tests, all of whom have come in and made big impacts as a test series. You know, even go back to 2009, Simon Shaw coming in. 2013, Corbin Sierra coming in, then getting injured and coming back in again. 2017, Sexton coming in the second test. 2021, there was a raft of changes as well. Obviously, that didn't go quite as well, but there's lots of scope for guys who, just if they're not in the first test team, to come back in. It's funny, Joe McCarthy montage in front of me on my TV here. He really was excellent.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Harris and Michael Hooper were doing comms on Aussie TV, and they were raving about Joe McCarthy. He was, I mean, like, doesn't take an expert to see it, but it's always interesting to hear what the Australians pick up on. And they were excited by Pollock, but McCarthy was the one. Like, he obviously won the Man of the Match award, and he got a serious. I think, you know, again, he's a player they wouldn't know an awful lot about. Probably the guys who watch a lot of rugby would, but the locals. Not that it was a huge amount of locals at this game. It was a very fairly heavy Lions crowd. There's about 45,000 in the Optus Stadium. It's a lovely venue. But yeah, McCarthy, I think he'll have fond memories of his trip here. He was really excellent. And like, that's what we can do. We know we can do that. And he's so different and like, you put him and a Tadhg in the same second row, that packs a punch. So he's got it. It's in his hands now. He played so well. And yes, Beirne is more probably, you know, he gives you more line out. Obviously gives you that breakdown threat. He's a better line-out. Sorry, I mentioned line-out already, but Beirne has loads of attributes of his own right. What McCarthy gives you is just so appealing to what Farrell wants to do. You know, he wins gain line, he makes those big carries. And he did cough up one penalty, but he was pretty disciplined tonight. So
yeah,
McCarthy only Beirne was less disciplined.
McCarthy only giving away one penalty is a win. That's a net win in my book.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, you know, an enforcer second row is always going to give up penalties. That's part of what he does. But some of them are silly. Obviously, the one against France being the biggest example of that. But the upside of Joe McCarthy is so exciting. And like, Lion stories are made for lads like him. He's a top of the ground player, like Dan Sheehan, who, again, I said was, you know, a little bit quiet tonight. He played well, but he wasn't, apart from the first try, which was exceptional. That was kind of like he had his highlight moment after 97 seconds, and then we didn't see an awful lot of him in those kind of show reel moments. But I think he's born for this stage, Dan Sheehan. Like, he looked so comfortable, and he captained the side pretty well as well. So, not that it was going to be a difficult night in that, you know, in that regard. Really, there wasn't a whole lot of. There was a bit of ref chat, but it was more Ben O'Keefe telling them, you know, your guys have to stop giving away penalties. So there was a bit of desperation, but I think the fact that they've now played a game, they've won a game well. They were a bit anxious in the week. Like, they didn't want to be. They were, you know, anytime they were asked about, you know, trying to enjoy the tour and all this sort of stuff, they were very much kind of not really wanting to talk about it because they hadn't won a game yet. I think they can relax a little bit now, albeit the schedule doesn't really allow them to relax because they roll straight to Brisbane tomorrow. Reds on Wednesday, and then they're off to Sydney to play Waratahs on Saturday. So this is the most relentless kind of travel schedule. It's a 5 or 6 hour flight to Brisbane. So it's you know, that's a bit of a grueler on the back of like coming over here last week. So it's relentless enough, but I think they can relax and enjoy it and feel like they belong a little bit more, because losing your first game was just such an unsettling thing for Lions, because, you know, you've got this high of coming into camp and being a Lion as such a career achievement, and then you go and lose your first game. It just kind of upsets the apple cart a bit. Now they can kind of say, okay, it might be just a force, but they've got to win. They've got momentum. They looked like the way I think Andy Farrell wants them to look, and that's all positive going into the rest of the tour.
Yeah, one last question, because I know you're running down to chat to Andy Farrell in a minute. So this kind of Wednesday, Saturday dynamic that you mentioned a few minutes ago. So when the team is named on Monday morning, what kind of team are we expecting to see? Like, is this going to be like as strong a team as he can muster at this point? Is it going to be a blend of Argentina and Western Force, or is it going to be predominantly the team that maybe played the first week with a couple of smattering of guys from Saturday? What's your kind of read from what you're kind of hearing?
I must give some credit to. I interviewed Ben Darwin, the former Wallabies prop, who has a company called Gain Analytics, who um, kind of basically have put a number or kind of measure cohesion. And I've interviewed. I haven't run the piece yet, but I'll be running that piece in the next couple of days. And he's got some really interesting ideas about how tough it is for the Lions. He thinks cohesion is the most important thing in sport, and obviously the Lions don't have cohesion. But he was the one who kind of alerted me to hit. It was kind of his theory, and then I've been kind of thinking about it. I think I agree with him. So this Wednesday, Saturday kind of dynamic. So like a lot of players came off after 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes today. So, you're going to have to back up. The squad's not big enough. The players are not going to be able to back up. I don't think we'll see a full, like, I'm not sure we'll see Dan Sheehan start on Wednesday. I think, I could see Cowan Dickey coming back in, but there will be some players who are asked to back up. And there's not a lot of opportunities for this test team to be together before, the way he's picked this, he's left Itoje out, the Saturday thing. It's still going to be some sort of a mix and match on Wednesday, but I think there's going to be more shape to it.
Because there's only two Wednesday games, Rod. Like, there's only two Wednesday games for the first test. So if this is the plan, it has to be kind of enacted on Wednesday.
I think the Brumbies. Well, yeah, but I don't think someone like Sheehan did 70 minutes today, so I don't think he'll start at it. But I mean, he might be on the bench, so it might be a bit of a mix and match in that way. Build some combinations. I'd say, yeah, I will know by Saturday the time the team is named for Waratahs, how strong he goes for that game. Like, the Waratahs are not great this year, so that's not seen as a massive challenge. And I think we're going to see the Brumbies is going to be the dry run for the test team. They may only get one hit out together. That could be it, but they could already be training together. Like, the players who are playing, the team that's playing on Wednesday trained today. So like, that's already, the plans for that game are already being put in place. So I'd say a couple of lads will back up on the bench. Maybe one or two will go again, but you got to have their legs in mind. So it may be just that Brumbies game where he goes as strong. So it's hard to know. Like, he names it Monday morning. It's going to happen. The whole thing's going to roll around pretty fast. We'll get more information then. But I think most of the players who played today, not all of them, a few did themselves a bit of damage. But like, a few of them a few of the lads who play on Wednesday will have to perform really well because of the way some of the players, particularly from an Irish point of view anyway, like McCarthy, Ringrose, Van der Fleer, England's Elliot Daly. Thomas Williams was really good before he got injured. I thought Finn Russell was excellent. I really did. I thought he had so many good touches, made good decisions, defended pretty well. I thought he looked like your test 10, really. Whether he goes again, I'm not sure. Obviously, Smith did well against Argentina, but I think Russell just has that edge because of his experience. So I think there's still a few decisions to make, but we're starting to see the front runners, but whether they ever get, when they get it all together is kind of one of these kind of things that's going to work itself out in the next week or two.
Well, Rod, thanks so much for joining us. I know you have to run down and do your other job, which is talk to Andy Farrell and write up a couple of pieces, which you can read on the Irish Independent website. So thanks for that, Rod.
Cheers, Will. Talk to you soon.
Cheers, buddy.